Okay, you lovely lot, so rig of the month time and Waggler. Finally get to do the bestest rig in the whole wide world, the Waggler. Honestly folks, if you know me, you know how much I love this particular style of fishing. Catches absolutely everything swimming. I mean, I'd love to use it all year round, but especially this time of year when natural baits are working, maggots, casters, it's just phenomenal. Let me talk you through the setup then. Now, I'm not going to say it's specialist, but certain elements can be a little bit specialist. It's really easy and simple to set up, but you've got to have your wits about you on a few certain aspects. So let's go through first the rod. Now, in pretty much all situations, you'll need a 13-foot rod for this style of waggler fishing, your traditional waggler fishing. There's no need for 11-foot, 12-foot rods because of the line pickup. Basically, we're looking to cast the float 20 to 30 meters, not really any further than that. And trust me, when you're going that little bit further up towards 30 meters, you do need a longer rod for the line pickup. So it's a really light float rod. This I can fish, you know, put 08, 010 up lengths, no problem at all. But more often than not, having said that, it'd be 012 up lengths. You shouldn't have to go any lighter than 012. There's still a little bit of colour in the water, but when it goes clearer, that's obviously when an 010 up length will make a difference. Now obviously the rods these days are tended to be more sort of carp orientated, so a bit too much power in for this style of waggler fishing. So just get yourself a nice light 13-foot waggler rod. Reel size as well, 2.5 to 3,000. You shouldn't, I mean, obviously it's perfectly acceptable to use a bigger reel, but they can just become a little bit too cumbersome. Whereas obviously when you're on a feeder, you've got it sat on a rest, you know, you might be waiting a few minutes between each cast. Waggler fishing, you're very active, so you want a smaller reel ideally. So 2.5 to 3,000 side. Line wise, it's so important that you're using a light main line. So ideally nothing thicker than, what we're saying, 0.18. I've got 0.16 on this, which is absolutely perfect because I'm only using a light waggler, which I'll come to in a sec. The trouble you'll have if you're using too thick a main line, there's too much resistance to your rod rings. So obviously it's catching on your rod rings if your line's too thick and you're not going to get the distance. But bearing in mind, you're not looking to cast, you know, too far. You want to make sure you can get the bait nice and accurate, or accurate as I used to say. So let's go through the rig itself then. So I'm going to start from the float actually. I'm going to do it back to front, Rich, for you. I'm going to start from the float. Now, float wise, again, I've talked through waggler fishing and I was set it up loads over the years, but you know, nothing ever changes for me. It's so important that you're setting it up in this particular way. First things first is the float. I'll always use loaded insert floats. This is a Kev Leach model, brilliant floats he does all different, you know, sort of shapes and sizes. You can take the bristles out of them and you know, change them to suit the light conditions on the day. You know, you might think they're pretty thick, but when you're on a waggler, it doesn't make a blind bit of difference. They're so sensitive, these floats. So loads of different sizes depending on obviously conditions on the day with the wind and everything. Then my go-to ones, I'll also use the loaded Drennan inserts as well. They take a little bit more shot either side, but they're still perfectly acceptable. Really good floats. Now you'll see when I'm locking the float, I'm using stots either side of the float. I don't want to put shots on because I might be moving this float a lot over the session. You know, if fish start coming off the bottom, then I want to shallow up. Obviously, if I need to go a little bit more over depth, if the wind gets up with undertow, this, that and the other, I might want to obviously go deeper. So to me, using shots, you're marking your line too much, especially quite a fine main line like the 0.16. So number 8 stots either side. You'll see I've got a little trimming number 10 stots as well, just to bring that float down a little bit more. And also you'll see I've got a gap in between the shots. Now that's very important for when you're striking into the fish, your float's collapsing on your line. If we didn't have that, if we had it fixed onto the float, you see there's all that resistance there. So you're striking against the float first, not the fish. So locking shots either side, yeah, there's different ways of doing it, which, you know, perfectly acceptable. Putting the little swivel on, you know, the traditional pellet waggler style, having the rubber up your line, two below it or 3 below it and 1 above it, and your snap link swivel on. But I just find this way so easy because more often than not I'll not be changing the float. You can put, you know, obviously the little rubber grommets on that go on the bottom of them kind of floats that you can change your float dead quick. but you know, you don't need to for this style of fishing because you're not getting the distance anyway. Now, coming down the line, so this has been plumbed up to roughly around just over 6 foot. I've got a series of number 10 droppers. So my first one's what? Well, let's go from the hook actually. It's probably about 3 foot from the hook, so half depth if you like, my first one. And then 8 inches above that, I've got another number 10. 8 inches below that, another number 10. And then 8 inches below that, just above me, my hook length, I've got another number 10. Now, number 10s as opposed to number 11s. More often than not, I would use number 10s. I think you just get that tighter line from when you feather the float and your bait lands past it, it's falling on a tighter line. If you use any 11s, I tend to use 11s for shallower water, and probably a maximum of 3 for that shallow water, and I'd be on lighter float. So if it was a bit more active and a little bit milder, I'd probably use a lighter float, looking to catch more fish through the water, and that's when I go to number 11 shots. But more often than not, I say for all this kind of fishing, when it's a little bit colder, number 10 shots are right. Now you'll notice a hook length as well. It's a long 12-inch hook length, 10 or 12-inch hook lengths. And again, the reason for the length, cheeky, is so that when it's falling through the water, I spat everywhere then, I do apologise. When it's falling through the water with that bait on, it's lovely and supple. This is 0.12, and it just acts lovely and supple as it falls through the water. It's a real versatile way of fishing a waggler. You know, you can cover a hell of a lot more area than you can with a pole. And obviously, the main advantage for the waggler for me is that there's nothing over the top, nothing there to spook the fish whatsoever. It's a brilliant way of fishing. You do catch absolutely everything on it. Coming down to the hook, I use pretty big hooks, to be fair. I'll use 16s, sometimes even 14s, but more often than not 16s hooks. As long as a light wire, you'll not have a problem whatsoever. So this is a 911 F1 size 16. By all means, yeah, 18s and 20s will work, but again, when I'm hooking the bait, I love fishing 2 and 3 maggots, just because it's a standout bait again. Feeding wise, I prefer to feed casters, but I can't blooming get hold of any casters at the minute. But as long as the wind's like this, it's favourable today for me. I've got the wind on my back, I can group the maggots nice and kind of like what we're saying. I'd go for like 3 metre square area, something like that. Casters you can be a little bit more accurate with, and obviously you can get the distance. But the beauty of maggots, as I said, they're going to catch everything swimming. So when you're fishing them in conjunction with casters, you've got the noise of the caster and being more accurate, but then as a standout bait, maggot works really well. And yeah, that's the rig basically. You know, there's nothing complex to it. The things you've got to watch out for is the feeding patterns of the fish. It can be an absolute nightmare at times, especially chub and eyed. Usually the best way is to feed first, cast into it and see what's happening. If that's not working, cast in first, single feed, double feed around it, and just work what's happening. If you're missing bites, or you know, you're coming back with snotted maggots, or you're bumping fish halfway through, tells you that the fish are coming up in the water. But this particular style that we're doing today, we are fishing all the depths of the water, but ultimately ending up on the bottom. So we're not missing out on absolutely everything. Give it a try, folks. It's so good. I promise you, you'll have your best days ever.